This content is based on facts for educational purposes. We do not intend to defame any company. Logos are omitted for copyright.
So we all know Apple's big pitch, right? They are the champions of our digital privacy. But what if that privacy shield is actually a competitive sword? Today, we're going to dig into Apple's app tracking policy to answer a really important question. Did they stop other companies from tracking you just to protect your privacy, or to become the only ones who could? And hey, you gotta give it to them. It was a brilliant script. This quote really nails it. Apple took privacy, something that used to be buried in the terms and conditions, and they slapped it right on the billboard. They didn't just promise to protect your data, they made it a core reason you'd want to buy their stuff. Now, the centerpiece of this whole promise is their app tracking transparency policy. You've probably heard it called ATT. The idea sounded great and pretty simple. Before an app like, say, Facebook could track you around the internet, it had to pop up and ask for your permission first. The choice was finally in your hands. Or, well, so it seemed. But here's where it gets really interesting. What about Apple's own advertising business? When it's their turn to ask, do they play by the exact same rules they force on everyone else? The evidence? Well, it suggests the answer is a big, fat no. And the trick is all in the design. So let's look at the actual evidence. It turns out not all of these consent pop-ups are created equal, not even close. See, Apple designed one set of rules for its competitors and a very, very different one for itself. And you can be sure this wasn't some kind of accident. It was a deliberate strategy. To really get what's going on here, we need to talk about this concept from behavioral science called choice architecture. It's basically the idea that how you frame a choice, the words you use, the colors, the design, can totally change what people decide to do. And as we're about to see, Apple is an absolute master of this. And honestly, this slide says it all. Just look at this. On the left, that's the prompt Apple uses for its own stuff. On the right, that's the one it forces every other app to use. One looks like an inviting, helpful screen. The other looks like a scary official system alert. The difference is just, it's night and day. Okay, let's break down the language here, because this is key. Apple asks if you want personalized ads. Sounds helpful, right? They even throw in a promise to protect your privacy. But everyone else, they're forced to use the scary, ominous word track. Apple's button is a friendly, positive turn on, while the other is just a cold allow. One is a sales pitch, the other is a warning label. So, we've seen the two different designs, plain as day. But does this little bit of choice architecture actually change how people behave? Does it really matter? Well, the data from a massive research study gives us a crystal clear answer. Now, you might be thinking, come on, it's just a few words, a different layout. How much of a difference can that really make? Well, in the world of design and psychology, a few words can change absolutely everything. The results of the study are, frankly, staggering. Get this, the study found that people are literally twice as likely to say yes to Apple's friendly prompt than they are to the scary one forced on competitors. Twice as likely. That one single design choice gives Apple double the consent rate, and that means double the data. And this chart from the study shows this wasn't a fluke. Look at app after app, Facebook, Instagram, X, DoorDash, you name it. The blue bar, that's Apple's friendly design. It consistently gets about double the opt-ins of the red bar, which is that scary tracking prompt. It is a systematic, predictable effect that gives Apple a massive, massive advantage. And it gets worse. The design doesn't just scare people away from sharing, it actively misleads them. The study also found that the word tracking makes people almost 10% more likely to wrongly believe an app is asking for their physical location data. So, the prompt Apple requires isn't just biased, it's genuinely confusing. Okay, so this isn't just some academic debate about design and psychology. This choice architecture has had a devastating, real-world financial impact on Apple's competitors, while, surprise, surprise, conveniently benefiting Apple's own business. This is where the story really shifts from privacy to pure profit. Just take a look at Meta, the parent company of Facebook and Instagram. One study estimated that in a single year, just 1 year, Apple's ATT policy cost Meta a mind-blowing $12.8 billion in revenue. Apple didn't just compete with them, they effectively kneecapped their entire business model. So what happened to Apple's business while all this was going on? Well, while Meta was losing billions, Apple's own services category, and yeah, that includes its ad business, saw its revenue jump by over 15%. They basically choked off the competition's data fire hose and opened their own spigot wide open. Now, you can't make moves like this on the global stage and not expect people to notice. And all around the world, governments and regulators are looking at the situation and seeing a classic, textbook case of a monopoly abusing its power. In Italy, for example, regulators didn't pull any punches. They slammed Apple with a $116 million fine and called what they did exploitative abuse. Their argument was simple. Apple was unfairly using its power as the owner of the platform to crush competitors and help itself. And it's not just Italy. Oh no, German antitrust authorities are investigating the exact same thing. France has already fined Apple over these rules. The consensus among these global regulators is becoming pretty clear. Apple is using a sledgehammer to solve a problem that needed a scalpel, and the so-called collateral damage to competition looks pretty intentional. So, let's just bring it all together. When you look at the bias design, the predictable effect it has on our choices, the financial devastation it caused Apple's competitors, and the growing backlash from regulators, the picture becomes pretty hard to ignore. This was never just about your privacy. It was a calculated, brilliant business move. Apple built this beautiful story about being your protector, while in the background, they engineered a system to monopolize your data. They didn't stop Meta from tracking you for your sake. They did it so they could be the only ones left to track you and profit from it. And this right here is the final damning piece of the puzzle. As Juris Legal News reported, regulators found that Apple could have protected user privacy without causing all this damage to the app economy. There were fairer ways to do this, but the goal, it seems, wasn't just privacy. The goal was control. Which leaves us with this final thought. We all think we're making a free choice about our own privacy. But when one company gets to design the very architecture of that choice, the words, the colors, the fear, the options, are we really in control at all? Or are we just following a script that was already written for us by the company that profits the most?